Hello, my name is Jeremy Newberry. I'm cybersecurity architect with Merlin Cyber. I'm here with one of our great partners, Jay Spann from Swimlane. He's an evangelist with the organization. And what we want to talk about is automation and the executive order, how we bring SOAR applications and apply that against the executive order from the Biden administration. Jay, could you talk a little bit through us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy. One of the things that I think we have all seen is just how much this is really impacting everybody. And when I say this, I mean the overall security risk that we face. Today's environments, whether they be the public sector, whether the federal sector, everybody is under a deluge of attacks and doing the best they can to try and defend themselves, try and prevent and rapidly recover from anything that they encounter. And what we see is that, on average, you can't just do that with one tool. You have a variety of tools that are in place, but what starts to happen when you have multiple tools is it becomes harder and harder to be working with the right tool at the right time and making sure that all those tools work together. And when you add to that the factor that the number of alerts that we're seeing is just astounding. I mean, whether it's 10,000 alerts a day, whether it's 1 million alerts a day, it is virtually impossible to try and handle all of those alerts, especially from a human perspective. Now, when you consider the fact that not handling those and trying to make all of your security solutions work together seamlessly, that's a big challenge. But if you don't do it, there's going to be a result. And in the public sector, we see that ultimately that can be very, very costly. Now, how do you attribute that cost? Well, certainly dollars speak volumes. And a study that was done by the Ponemon Institute said that the average cost of a breach in the public sector is like $3.86 million. The fact that it takes so long to contain a breach and recover from this obviously adds to that factor. But there's also other hidden costs that go along with this that affect everybody. And I think that's one of the things that we really are going to talk about on the next slide.
And I assume when we're talking about this, it's cost of a breach, but really the federal government or state governments as well, you're talking about cost of mission, you're talking about risk to the national security, risk to a wide range of individuals. It tends to be much larger than simply the risk to a corporate entity.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, when you start thinking about the real cost, a lot of times people forget to recognize things like what is the cost, not just to us, but there's a cost and there's a risk to contractors, to third-party vendors. There's a potentially an overall cost to the public. There's that loss of trust. There could be a potential loss of funding. Obviously, there's going to be increased scrutiny. You're going to look at potentially, depending upon what the breach is and what's going on, maybe even some operational loss, like the ability to effectively conduct business. And those have far-reaching implications, especially to any of the agencies that face these risks. So I think one of the things that that we really are trying to make everybody recognize here is that it's not just risk, it's really impact. What is the impact to the mission? And a lot of these factors are things that obviously drove the need to have this executive order, which Jeremy, I'll have you talk about that in just a second, but wanted to kind of point out, that as we talk about this, especially the fact that it calls out the need for SOAR, security, orchestration, automation, response. What is it that we really are trying to drive home and make sure everybody follows that is important about these actual pieces of that puzzle? What is it that we mean by orchestration, automation, and response? And you want to consider that when we have those multiple security tools, we need to be able to connect them so that they can work together seamlessly. We need to be able to build a playbook, a workflow that allows us to build out tasks that will involve any and or all of those tools so that they work together seamlessly. That's the orchestration piece. But you also want to be able to do it in such a way that you're getting that guaranteed result, meaning it's going to happen consistently every time, and most importantly, at machine speed. And that's that automation piece that we get. And of course, what we're really looking for is that result. We want the result to be lowering our risk and lowering the potential impact to the mission. And we can do that by setting up our responses to be anywhere from fully automated to somewhere in between, some hybrid. And Jeremy, I think you can probably speak to the point of, how important this is to the mission of these agencies, especially with the executive order.
One of the interesting things about SOAR and the concepts behind it, it's, I often, when I'm telling the story about this, as a geek, as a nerd, as an engineer, as an analyst, as an administrator over the years, we've all written scripts ourselves, and we tend to have hundreds of megs to gigabytes to even terabytes in some cases of scripts in the background that I've known that have kicked off at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just kind of hope that it ran the next morning. You have that as one point where individuals have created these things that they already know they have to automate. But then going back to the complexity of the federal government and the myriad of solutions that have been purchased over the years that, oftentimes were never really designed to work together, although they overlap in many, many, many ways. And that's really where I've always seen SOAR, that orchestration automation point, that integration point, that universal hub of data exchange between applications. That's really what SOARs are for. And I really feel that's where this executive order was pointed, of looking at the overall complexity of the federal government and how do we stitch that together? How do we automate that as best as part? And let's be honest, especially in cybersecurity, we are dramatically understaffed. It's not simply a matter of we're not hiring, it's a matter of the bodies don't exist. If I can find a way to take 15 minutes of repetitive work on a per incident basis out of an analyst's hands and give that back to the organization, I have potentially given the equivalent of hiring a whole other body into that organization just by that added efficiency. And that's really where I feel that they were going after with this CEO in the long run.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
One of the interesting things about SOAR as well is simply the wide range of use cases that can be done. I mean, generally, you think about it in pure security bent, like your phishing triage or automated testing or credential leak monitoring. But some of the interesting use cases I've dealt with customers get much broader than that. That's things like user onboarding, user on and offboarding, where when a user leaves the organization, removing the credentials that user has throughout, and then doing the same thing when I bring someone on, right? I think I just reversed that. Is, when I hire somebody, creating all the accounts, when I get rid of them, or excuse me, they leave the organization, you're removing them all afterwards and making that seamless in the background rather than it just sitting out there. If we think about recent breaches, you can even go to the Colonial Pipeline, where that was a VPN connection that it was an account sitting out there that should have been removed, and there wasn't an offboarding process to remove it. So it was just sitting there and no one even realized it was there. But that's the type of thing that Swimlane or SOAR application in general would create. Other ones, anytime you get something that you start drawing the process out on a whiteboard and making your decision trees, and that's, large chunks of that can be automated. And that's really the key to a SOAR.
Yeah, I could not have said that better myself. You really hit the nail on the head there with the fact that, again, that's where people tend to start out because security is so critical. But once you really learn what automation and orchestration can do, you start to see the power of being able to take those tasks that are the tedious, monotonous, repetitive tasks and start giving time back to the teams and the employees so that they do have that time to be more proactive and guaranteeing results. And I love your example of the offboarding. And it's just like, again, you and I have both been in so many situations where we've seen instances where something was missed. And if you have it done with automation and it's going to occur, you don't end up with those accounts that are hanging out there like that.
Or in the case, at least, where I should have a full audit trail of did it fail or not. Which kind of brings us into the next space of, automation is really being spread throughout a wide range of tools, right? There, over and over again, other solutions are bringing in bits of automation, thankfully, right? And tying themselves together. EDR to XDR is a great example of that, where you have a wide range of products that are building their own automation into it. And then really those swim lanes taking it further than that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And while people will tend to get their start with SecOps, one of the things that they find very quickly, and I think as we hit to the next part of this slide, it expands. That's what happens is people start to recognize, hey, wait a minute, this isn't just something to integrate with my SecOps environment. That's a great place to start. We definitely want to incorporate that. We definitely want to tackle that immediately, but we can go beyond that, whether it's DevOps, whether it's identity or risk, privacy. You have so many different types of use cases and areas where this can be done. And one of the things that we'll see here in a moment is we'll talk about the ability of this low code security automation right there, where what happens is you get people with the ability to develop beyond what they might have first thought they could do. So for example, if you start in the upper left-hand corner here, we talk about low code security automation, and what exactly does that mean? What does that give us? Well, you have to consider that you could go the route of no code automation, and there are some tools out there that do that, but essentially what you're subscribing to is somebody handing you a pre-written playbook that says, here's how you're going to do it, and that's about all you're going to be able to do. When you want to be able to customize it or go outside that wheelhouse, or have additional reporting or case management, or many of the other things that you really are going to want to have and use with SOAR, you don't have that option. On the other end of that scale, if you're full code, well, you're pretty much writing your own entire automation. If that's something that you have the development team to do, you might do it. But low code really hits that sweet spot, because you do get the ability, like we said on that first couple of slides, to integrate with any of your tools. You can connect any and all of those tools and decide what tasks you want to be able to run. You are not limited, at least with Swimlane's case, you're not limited to any particular type of technology or workflow you want to build. And again, it goes well beyond the SOC and well beyond just the typical security use cases that people think of. But here's that key point that I wanted to make is it enables those individuals that are experts in their domain area, whether that is privacy, whether that's risk, whether that is threat intel, it enables them to very easily become experts and build out workflows that they are very familiar with that can help that particular area of the agency, mission, enterprise. But it's so easy to do because of the drag and drop capability that low code provides. And again, what this means is you can do some coding if you want, but you don't have to. And that allows you to come up with some very good representations of exactly what's going on in the system. And we'll actually show you some examples of that in just a bit, with some examples of the dashboards and the UI that you can see.
One of the interesting things you hit there is up in the upper left-hand corner is that rapid API first integration. So, we've been around for a while, and I know as a vendor in a previous life, if someone called me up and said, hey, I need an integration to XYZ product, my answer from that particular firm, from that particular vendor, was good luck with that. Let me know how it works. And I might have a manual to throw at you with a RESTful API. And how in the world am I going to integrate everything into Swimlane in that case?
Yeah, and that's just it. It's so easy to do because the plugins exist, and that's all you need to have. And if let's say there is a plugin that doesn't exist, one of the things that we do for our customers is we'll provide those plugins. All we have to have is that API ability to connect to it, and in some cases even beyond the API. But typically, like you said, RESTful APIs, and that makes it so easy to make that connection and provide the plugins for the customers.
So that definitely takes care of where we live from an integration perspective, and the repeatable, reusable technologies. One of the interesting things I've always found around Swimlane is kind of how it fits in. It's many things to many people. And depending on exactly what you're looking for, it can be that system of record, just like in sales, engineering, HR, or IT, where each of those areas have their own help desk technologies. Swimlane provides that secure service desk, a secure system of records, that container of artifacts for the SOC team. It's, especially in some of our industries, DoD, IC communities, et cetera, they're not very comfortable uploading all their technology or all their PII and all their gathered evidence up to, say, the enterprise service now, no matter, they don't want to stand up another tenant of it, or they don't want somebody else controlling the rules for it. Yeah, it's one of those neat things that I found Swimlane provides that. and something I can even go further and customize and use it for things like training and otherwise.
Yeah, that is a great point. And like you said, for people that are used to working in sales, maybe their system of record is Salesforce. If you work in HR, maybe it's Workday and IT. A lot of us would use something like ServiceNow. But again, to your point, we need a way to have that secure system of record for everything security related. And that's exactly what Swimlane's low code security automation can do.
And the nice thing is the fact that it's actually kept in a hashed and secure database in the back end. And anything that touches it is recorded. There's a complete audit log the entire way through, whether somebody modifies an artifact, brings one in, records it, uploads a new one, every touch of the way is there. So even in the case of if I need to use this, say for instance, for legal ramifications, I actually have the opportunity to leverage that. It's actually a complete custodial chain of complete chain of custody as it goes through.
Excellent example. Yeah, great point.
It's like I've had that conversation with someone.
I totally get that. Again, having seen it myself, I would totally agree. And one of the things that's important about the way Swimlane operates, for anybody that's curious, well, what exactly are we seeing? What gets accomplished? How does it function? This diagram is a great way to give you the basic parameters. Data comes into Swimlane. That's the left-hand side of the document. It can either be pulled into Swimlane or pushed into Swimlane, however you want to do that. And once it's in Swimlane, that's where you have the ability to set up those workflows, that orchestration, the ability to control what tasks and when the tasks are performed, that automation that you want to put together. And as you're going to see from some of the screenshot examples in a moment, the ability to do that full case management and get the visualizations of almost any type in various dashboards and get real-time metrics of exactly what's going on as Swimlane performs those tasks for you. And of course, the right-hand side of this is really what happens as a result. Well, obviously that depends on what you've built as far as your orchestration, connecting all your systems, what you've built as their tasks and the automation, but it literally could be almost any type of action that you could imagine, all the way from your typical third-party actions to things like notifications, changes within a business process. Again, the sky's really the limit, and people definitely start to see that once they realize the power of Swimlane, because at its heart, it really is an automation engine.
When we start working through this, it becomes fairly simple. It is a complete information data flow, right? I mean, the information is coming in or the data is coming in on the left-hand side, whether it's pulled or pushed. And I mean, I've seen it used for things like I'm sitting there monitoring an email box. I've sit there, a REST API call. I'm watching for particular text instances coming in, or even I'm reaching out. And one of those neat things I've always liked the ability to be not fully automated or hybrid or completely interactive, depending on what the use case is. I've used this in insider threat cases. I've done this or I've seen it used in complete different automation scales where I'm waiting for somebody to respond. So I have a path the entire way down. In fact, I can then even do things complete collaboration inside there from a notification perspective. Goes a long way to providing that the case management. Which, speaking of case management, yeah,
exactly.
Oddly enough, we flow right into it. Right? It's amazing. We were looking at it. This is one of those things that I've always really loved. One that I can customize this at each of the different levels, but I'm able to go a lot further in simply case management. I grew up back in the day using things like BMC Remedy, way back when, and some other stuff even older than that when it was still all text files. And one of the things that absolutely strikes me as useful is, for instance, that checklist on the left-hand side and the where I am in the process on the top. That checklist on the left makes sure that I do it right every time. And depending on who's looking at it, it could have different options for them. The fact that I want to create a run book and I'm creating that run book, you go through these tasks, you make sure this box is checked, this box is checked, this evidence is uploaded, this artifact is captured. And it's a great training tool, but while at the same time enabling and empowering the upper level, level 2, level 3 analysts who can have some of these automatically checked off, a little more leeway as it goes, or even additional buttons and actions built into this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key point for me here, you could show anybody a lot of different case management screens because the platform is so flexible. So I think the key thing for me on this particular slide is that third bullet point where it says, it's adaptable to an infinite number of use cases, because really, again, the sky's the limit in terms of the way you want to represent the data or manage the data, whether it's on different tabs, within sections, within different, widget elements. There's just so many things that you can do, and it gives you the flexibility to really and truly manage the data the way you want to.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with one of our customers that what blew them away was the simple pieces that are built into the background. Things like automatically parsing the email body and importing that directly into the case itself, or doing things like directly reaching out to your enrichment partners and bringing in that enrichment based on the IOCs or the hashes that are there without that user, right? So anything that's in that workflow that you create, that we're going to show on the next slide, that data is all automatically collected, correlated, and dropped in here in a way. That's where that time saving for the engineer comes from. I distinctly recall doing research earlier in my career where I'm going to website after website after website, copy paste. It's the same thing for all of them, right? That's the reason for the run book. Well, you automate all that and you put it right there for me. Right? You just took 30 minutes of my work day on this one incident and you automated it for me and put it, you actually parsed it out even and did enrichment on IOCs found without me touching it.
Yeah, I again, it's almost fun to the point of being able to watch somebody see what this can do for the first time, especially as, like you said, as you build out and drag and drop the elements into the workflow, and how easily that can accomplish the steps and how quickly that can accomplish those steps. And the fact that, you're really not limited in terms of what those steps can do.
And that kind of takes us to the next stage of what the workflows look like. It's, once again, I don't mean to harken back to like I'm some aged old timer in the world, no matter how much gray's in my beard. It's one of those things when you build those run books, you're up at a whiteboard. You're drawing the whiteboard out in a decision tree. I'm going to start from the left to right. All right, here are my two choices. Here's the next ones. And then you're documenting that in PowerPoint or in Visio or PowerPoint occasionally, when it goes through. This directly links back to that. It's amazing. This looks so much like what I've drawn up on whiteboards over the years when we were creating that run book. Starting from the left to right, here's the problem, here's a decision tree, here's my next option. I'm typically doing this in Visio or PowerPoint myself, or worst case by hand, in which case the biggest difference that I see is one, this looks very like it, but I can actually read what's on the in the workflow versus my own handwriting.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. The whole idea behind Swimlane's low-code security automation is that ease of use, where you should be able to do this very simply with a drag and drop and build out a workflow through very simple conditions and actions where you say, if this, then this is what I want to happen. And again, like you said, be able to read it and understand it. And it should be very straightforward, like the example you see.
And you can actually continue iterating out from this as well, right? So I can take a copy of this and go, you know what, this is great for this particular type of triage, but now I need to do another one. So I can just take this copy and start making modifications to it better and better and better as over time.
Very true.
So that takes us kind of into the orchestration of what are we bringing into this, right? What do those integrations look like? And you said something really important earlier, that Swimlane is the one who owns those integrations. You actually go out and create these and update them as they go. Unlike in my earlier example, where as a vendor, I just kind of told you to pound sand, you guys actually care enough to go and build that for them and to make sure it's kept updated, right?
Absolutely true. It's one of those critical components. What our perspective on it is the customer's not going to be able to do what they need to do if the product does not truly integrate with everything that they have. So where there is the possibility of creating some type of integration, again, primarily RESTful API, but even in some other instances, other types of connections that could be made, those are going to be provided. And like you said, Jeremy, kept up to date. And as different tools and technologies update their APIs, maybe make additional tasks or options available. Those get updated as the plugins get updated. And again, it's not that we're going to be able to go out there and say, hey, we have an integration for everything that exists. I don't think any vendor would ever say that. So as new ones are brought to our attention and a customer says, hey, we need this, if it's something we don't have, it's something that we're going to create for them, because we again, it's helpful for everybody. It's helpful for that customer. It's going to be helpful for us as well.
Hey, it's even helpful for the vendor themselves, because then because of the job you guys do, you can actually find their bugs in the code itself. The APIs don't work, or the correct information then come back out. It helps be kind of bi-directional in communication across the board. It's always easier coming from one company to another, rather than oftentimes a consumer kind of going back out going, please do this for me.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, I'd love to think that it wasn't true, that we would never find those, but obviously you're right, we do.
And that really kind of flows finally into, well, what are we getting out of this? How do we display this? What does it mean? And that's, as that workflow is created, and as that help desk, that case management board is created, all those fields become reportable. And you can then start building that into the dashboards and metrics. So regardless of whether they're working inside the case, whether they're a director, whether they're a senior executive, whether they're analyst or an admin, all that data is there available for you. And it's, well, for me, it kind of drives home what it's doing for you in the long run. And there's a couple of different screenshots here of what that looks like. But it is nice. You're one of the only tools that I've sold over the years, that I've worked with you're one of the only tools I've worked with over the years that can really do the true gift of time. You can actually give me time back into my environment. One of those things that is the most precious of things in all times, right? And so I can then not only understand what that is, but also exactly what my security environment is looking like. So from a service desk and help desk perspective, I'm able to see that in true sense, but then have all the reportable metrics that I want locked down to role-based access controls at a fairly inf level.
Yeah, and you really had several key points there that I think, again, everybody needs to recognize. And one of those is the ability for you to not only get those real-time visualizations of the data of what's in the system. Keep in mind, one of the advantages to having a tool like Swimlane connected to all of these systems is, with all that data flowing through, you now have some really easy ways to create good visualizations of exactly what's going on, and the power with those role-based access controls to determine who can see it. And again, it gives you so much flexibility in terms of what does that look like. So really it becomes a question of, what dashboard or dashboards do I want to have? What elements do I want to live on that dashboard? And what do I want to look like? How do I want to represent this data? Sometimes it might be a report. Sometimes it might be a chart or a graph, or maybe it's something even a little more creative that you decide you want to do. But there's a lot of flexibility in how you represent the data. The beauty is that you have the ability to go there at any time and see exactly what's going on. And one of the things I particularly like is the fact that any of these elements, they're active elements. So if I want to look at the supporting data that makes up any of this, you're just clicking on that dashboard element and going right to the supporting chart or report that's creating that. And from there into the actual record, if you want.
That's one thing Swimlane's really kind of grasped onto and really designed around the minimum clicks to get to relevant information, and being able to drill down into a particular chart and have that information directly shown to me in however it's being gathered and correlated, so I understand it. And then even being able on the back end, going back to that earlier conversation of audit and tray and system record, being able to see exactly how that data was correlated, how it was added up, the metrics that were behind it, who touched it, how they touched it, did it fail, did it not fail, and understand that to an nth degree allows really a huge amount of data to be processed. And then kind of backing away from that, sometimes too much information is simply too much information. It's fairly easy to start widgeting down, paring this down, removing widgets, and to figure out down to a bare bones access level, what does this individual need? A lot of times you start with too much information and you start paring it down to just get to what you actually, these few metrics that are most important. And what's nice is I can simply make a quick edit to the dashboard, republish it, and I'm there.
Yep. Again, I could not agree more. The flexibility here gives you that power to really determine exactly what needs to be there or not. So you can change it at any time and add more, remove, whatever you need to do. But that flexibility is definitely there.
Well, Jay, I really want to say thank you for joining me today going over this. And if we wanted to follow up a little bit more of this, I believe links will be around the video and around the talk track to reach out to both of us.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Anytime.